speaker is Professor Carmen Cuerva, and Carmen is going to present Environmental and Employment Responsible Innovation, Empirical Evidence for Spanish Firms.
Good morning. My name is Mari Carmen Cuerva. I come from the University of Castilla-La Mancha, and I'm going to present a paper titled Environmental and Employment Responsible Innovation, Empirical Evidence for Spanish Firms. It's a work made jointly with Angela Triguero and Carlos Alvarez from the University of Castilla-La Mancha also. Well, as an introduction, the main aims or the main objective of this research are several. First, we want to know what are the explanatory, the drivers of being environmental-oriented innovator or employment-oriented innovation. In this sense, we will see later, but we have defined that we understand that, for instance, a firm is an environmental-oriented innovator if in the objective when this firm comes to innovating, it's very important for its purpose to reduce the environmental damage. And in this sense, we define employment-oriented innovation when a firm said that it's very important for its objective of innovation to increase or maintain the level of employment in its firm. Okay? So this is the main objective, no? To see the drivers in these two types of innovation strategies. No? The second objective, the second aim, is that we want to see if these drivers are similar or different. If there are differences between the drivers that explain the environmental-oriented innovation and employment-oriented innovation. And finally, we want to know if the environmental innovators show high awareness about the employment, about social concern in relation to its innovation strategy. You know? So there are the three main objectives of this research. The main contribution of this work is that we treat with two types of innovation, but we think that are very correlated. No? In this sense, we think that first have to take into account when they comes to innovating the social and the environmental concerns. Okay? Well, the contents of this presentation is in first place, we are going to see the theoretical framework, very short. Secondly, we explain the database. In third section, we speak about the methodology very quickly. In point 4, we explain the main result. And finally, we summarize the main conclusion of the research. Well, about the theoretical framework, like my co-author Angela has explained, eco-innovation has been an important and very important topic in the literature in the last years, during the last years. In this sense, there are a large number of works, or a large number of empirical and in quantitative terms and in qualitative terms about the analysis of eco-innovation. No? Most of these studies try to explain the drivers of eco-innovation according to internal and external factors of the firm or according to regulation or environmental problems. No? And you can see some example of some works in this sense. No? But only few studies consider the correlation between eco-innovation and employment. And in this sense, most of these studies conclude that the effect of eco-innovation in terms of employment is neutral or is very small. No? This is the general conclusion of this study. No? But little is now about the difference in the determinants of eco-innovation and employment-oriented innovation. No? And little is now about the synergies between these two types type of innovation strategies. No? So we think that it's very important, it needs a better understanding of responsible innovation with natural resources and human resources. Well, to do that, we start from the resource-based view perspective, and we combine this with the competitive dynamics perspective. In this sense, we consider that fair resources, internal and external, capabilities of the fair, and in addition, the strategies or the competitive action of fair are very important drivers of, in this case, of innovation. No? And this framework allows us to take into account influence of internal and external factors to the fair, and at the same time other competitive strategies, no? When the firms decided to innovate, no? As intermediate factors. Well, in this figure, you can see our theoretical framework, no? And in this sense, we have considered, in one hand, technological capabilities, and in the other hand, the competitive strategies. No? In this sense, technological capabilities are represented by resources of the firm, such sites that represent economies of scale, age that represents learning economies, the R&D resources. For instance, the fact of being member of a group, of firms, and the public support. No? And at the same time, the availability of knowledge is important for these technological capabilities, and in this sense we consider the source of innovation, internal and external, and the technological opportunities measured by the sector activity of the firm. No? And at the same time, as mediator factor, we consider the competitive strategy of the fair. In this sense, we consider the type of innovation strategy, if the fair is a process innovator or product innovation or organizational innovator, and the market orientation of the fair. No? So these drivers, we think that have a very important influence of environmental and employment innovation that at the same time are very correlated. Well, data from this study comes from the last wave of Spanish CIS, Community Innovation Survey, that in Spanish is known as PITEC, no? El Panel de Innovación Tecnológica, for the last year, 2011. This database is very rich and contains information for nearly 13,000 companies about motives of innovation, obstacle, reason, and other variables such the size, the age, the sector activity, the export, the types of innovation. It's very rich base. And the problem is that in this case, there are nearly 13 companies, but we only pay attention to the innovative companies. So in this case, our sample is set by 6,553 companies. No? This is our final sample. What are our dependent variables? Well, in this case, we have constructed our dependent variables according to two questions of the survey. The first variable is, we have called it eco-innovation, and it's a dummy variable that has the value 1 if the first report high or medium importance in the question of reducing environmental impact as an aim, as an objective in innovation in the last years. And the second dependent variable, it's something that we have called employment innovation, employment-oriented innovation, and in this case a dummy variable with the value 1 if the first reports high or medium importance in the question of increasing or maintaining employment as an objective of innovation in the last years. Well, in a preliminary data analysis, we observed that nearly half of the sample. Sorry again. Nearly half of the sample has an innovation oriented to environmental responsible behavior, no? And only 26% of the sample it's employment responsible innovators. But what is most important is that firms that increase or maintain employment, that's an objective, and at the same time has environmental concern, in this case, we find 20% of the sample. Okay? Well, and as explanatory variables, we use from resources the size, the age, the fact of being in a group of firms, the public support, the R&D staff measured through the percentage of researchers in the firms. About the knowledge, we use internal and external source of knowledge. Internal knowledge or information comes from providers and clients, from competitors, for private research centers, universities, public research centers, and finally we consider the sector of activity of the company. No? And in relation to competitive strategy, we use dummy variables to see if the firm is process innovator, product innovation, or organizational innovator. And in addition, we consider a dummy to see if the firm has an international oriented situation. No? If the firm is exporter. Okay. Well, the methodology. First, we use bivariate probability regression that allow us to estimate the probability of two different but correlated processes. No? That we think that are very correlated eco-innovation with employment-oriented innovation. So we use this methodology. And finally, we estimate a probability regression to analyze the effect of being an eco-innovator over the probability to carry out employment-oriented innovation. Well, in this table, we can observe the result of the B-probit regression in terms of marginal effect, which is better to the interpretation of the data. No? We have two models. In the first one, we include we don't include the type of innovation, and in the second one, we include the type of innovation. But the results are very, very similar, as you can observe. No? In this sense, the first thing that is important to see is the raw value. No, this coefficient is significant, and that means that these two processes, these two types of innovation are very correlated. So this methodology is correct to use. No? Okay. The second important result is that drivers of eco-innovation and employment-oriented innovation are very similar. No? We can see the effect of R&D personnel, the public finances, and the internal and external sources. But we can observe difference between the importance of the drivers between these two kinds of innovation. For instance, R&D personnel is more important for eco-innovator than for employment innovator, but we can see in this case that the effect is very small. No? This figure means that if we increase in 1% the percentage of R&D researchers in the companies, the probability of eco-innovate or employment innovate increase in less than 0.1. So in this case, the effect is very, very small. No? Another important variable is, for instance, the public financing, the public support. In this case, it's very important for these two kinds of innovation, but it's more important for eco-innovation. No? In this case, no, the probability of doing eco-innovation increase in about 10%, 11% more or less, if this firm receives public support. So it's very important in this case. No? Another important variable is the internal innovation source, in this case, within the first, obviously. No? In this case, it's more important, in addition, for eco-innovator than for employment innovation. And the same occurs with the vertical cooperation. I mean, the information comes from clients and supplier, and with the private research centers, and with public research centers. No? In this sense, it's more important for eco-innovator than for employment innovation. On the contrary, for instance, the information comes from competitors and universities is more important for employment innovator than for eco-innovator. Well, when we introduce, for instance, the type of innovation, in this case, we don't observe important difference with the exception of organizational innovator. In this sense, we can observe that the fact of being organizational innovator is more important for being eco-innovator than for being employment-oriented innovator. No? In this sense, if a firm is organizational and innovator, its probability of doing eco-innovation increase in about 13%, so it's very important. Where we can observe the main difference between these two types of employment in terms of driver? Well, in the size. For instance, the size is very important for being eco-innovator. Large firms are more prone to do eco-innovation, but for instance, this variable is not significant for employment-oriented innovation. And the other important variable is the age. No? In this sense, the age has a positive relationship with employment innovation, but is correlated negatively with the eco-innovation. Okay? Well. In the second part of the research, we have estimated probability regression to see the importance of being or have environmental to see environmental concern in terms of employment innovation. And if we include this variable in the model, we observe that it's very important. No? The probability of doing eco-innovation increased in nearly 26% if you are employment-oriented innovator. So they are very correlated, as we have seen in the probability regression. Okay. Finally, the main conclusion of the work is that nowadays, in a knowledge-based economy, the environmental and social benefit of innovation must be considered. And so do that in this work. No? This paper explores the difference between the drivers of eco-innovation and employment-oriented innovation in a sample of a Spanish firm for all sectors in economy in the year 2011. In general, we find that drivers are very similar in the special case of the technological capabilities. These drivers are very similar in forward taste of information. Nevertheless, size, for instance, is only significant for eco-innovation, and age decreases the probability of eco-innovating. No? The effect of R&D resources, the public support, internal knowledge sources, and some external sources, such as information for clients, for suppliers, for public and private centers, and it's very important, or it's more important for eco-innovators than for employment innovators. Another important question, another important conclusion is the role of organizational innovation. No? In this sense, organizational innovator has more stimuli than other innovator to adopt eco-innovation and employment-oriented innovation. But this effect is in particular very important for eco-innovator. No? And the main result for us is that it's possible for firms to cope with climate change, pollution, or sustainable use of scarce resources, and at the same time employment. So it's very important. No? In this sense, the probability, we have seen that the probability of doing eco-innovation increased notably when first taking into account social concern in relation to the employment. No? So it's very important. From the point of view of policy maker, we think that it's crucial the public financial support to incentivize green and social capabilities to the firms, in the firms. No? In this sense, this public support should be aimed to foster cooperation with external agents and to develop organizational innovations such as managing of knowledge, development of human resources, organization of work, or managing of quality and environmental system. Okay? So thank you very much for your attention, and any question my colleague Angela and me can answer.
Is there any question?
What do you understand, what do you mean by employment innovation?
Employment-oriented is important, the concept of oriented. No? It's very simple. It's based in a question of the survey. No? The survey asks to the firm. When you innovate, you consider important to increase or maintain employment? And the first said, yes or no? Maintain. Well, we have considered maintain because in these times, it's important not only to increase, but also maintain. So it's very simple. It's only a question to the fair that, do you take into account or your objective, when you innovate, you take into account the objective of increase or maintain employment? Yes or not? This is the differentiation we have done. Luis.
Any other question?
Luis.
Yeah. Yes.
Another question. Is it possible to consider the possibility of difference between qualification of the employment? Because maybe some eco-innovation is good for people with tall qualification and bad for disqualification workers.
No, yes, it's a good question, and it's possible, no? Because in the survey there is another question that said if the objective of this innovation is to increase qualification, or to.
We have two questions about we have three questions about employment. If you, with your innovation, is going to increase the employment, you are going to increase or decrease, you are going to maintain, but you choose two questions to do one, because we believe in a country like Spain with an unemployment rate higher than 20%. It's very important to maintain employment. And there are a third question. The third question is among your aims of innovation is the increase of qualified employment. So we have the three. Probably we are going to try in the future. Yeah. And what more? Because it's very tricky, perhaps the concept, but because when you innovate, you have two effects. You have the displacement effect of employment, but we believe we have the compensation effect. That you are winning, probably yourself are going to increase. Are you in the medium and long term? You have both benefits. So the displacement effect exists in the short run. But probably the compensation effect is more important. We have to be responsible with the natural resource and with human resource. This is the concept or the idea.
Yes, Francisco?
But it's not a question, it's more a suggestion or a concept. Yeah. With your paper is cross-sectional, and you're aware that you cannot establish any causality, but in your model you propose that the type of innovation strategy influences or causes the orientation of the innovation. And you are putting as an independent variable the type of innovation, which is an output of innovation, and as a dependent variable the objective of that innovation. And the causality, I would say that is the other way around. The objective of the innovation or the orientation what causes the type of innovation. So if you want to include in your model how the type of innovation can influence the orientation of the firm, I would suggest you to use the lagged innovation.
Okay.
Innovation.
Yes.
So that you can say that innovation causes innovation, but if you put it this way, I would say that the causality is the other way around. First, you fix your objective, and that orientation is what makes you have an output. Product or process innovation. Not that the output, the product innovation or the process innovation, what makes you have a different orientation.
Yes. I know what you say, and it's a further research, but we would like to have a panel data and study the dynamic of this behavior. So in the future, we would like to do that and use lag variables to see the effect and study in terms of persistence of innovation. So it's a good idea. It's something that we have think about it. So thank you.
Carmen, I really congratulate you on your work. It's a very nice approach to try to join those different types of innovation. Just two recommendations for the future. try to explain better. I know here at the conference we're always running out of time. Try to explain better what you mean, as the colleague asked you, by
Define
employment-oriented innovation, and be very careful when assuming that it is social responsible innovation, and also when recommending policymakers to really push eco-innovation or push funds, not to recommend to make horizontal policies in this type of works, as we are completely showing previous works that we should recommend vertical policies more oriented to what they really, you really find a relation, and not horizontal policies. Much better. So your work will really gain a lot and will improve.
Thank you very
Congrats.
much for your solution.
Thank you.